I didn't even know we were live. So
No, no apology
go ahead.
necessary. Okay, yeah, Nina, continue.
Okay. So what I find appealing to gender abolition is the, obviously the abolition of gender roles. I think the phrasing of abolition doesn't do it any favors. As a concept, it's kind of like how people like when you first see it, you're like the police abolition, like, oh, well, so there's just going to be no, all of that type of thing. I think it's a great phrasing, so I don't want people to get wrapped up in what that means. It's a theory basically that is just generally saying that gender roles are pretty antiquated. They're not really very necessary, and I think they're actually at this point a hindrance. And what I mean by that is that it's a hindrance to the point of I don't know why. Like you would imagine that you'd want the best person for the job to get said job, and there's no direct line that all of a sudden because it's in this particular role that is related to your if you're like a guy or whatever, that you're going to be better at those things, when I think that the rigid aspects of gender roles will kind of assume that, which I think we could hopefully agree doesn't really make sense. Like if you're going to go into a job that's maybe like, okay, I'm doing construction, maybe a guy would be better at that because of the physical aspect of it. But if we're going into a job like where most of our jobs are right now, in obviously like white collar or service industry, where we're not doing like strength based things, we're using technology, right? There really isn't any reason to have any differentiation when it comes to like careers. I think it's very toxic. To change a little bit here when it comes to gender roles, I think it's incredibly toxic to say like, oh, guys can't be stay-at-home fathers because they're not men if they can't be stay-at-home fathers. I think that is really like anti-man, personally. I think that that's really stupid, and I think that it's harmful to both men and women to have these roles where you can't do something that you want to do because you are, either a man or a woman. I think that that's like one of the worst things about gender roles, is just that aspect where it's telling you what you can and you cannot do because you just are one thing. And I think that that's antiquated, stupid, and unhelpful. And I don't understand how anyone could defend that.
Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, so I didn't actually hear an argument of any kind for anything, not a single ought. I actually didn't even hear really a description for what is, right? Just kind of like just this nebulous, I don't really think that, like a construction worker should be barred from being a woman, or a dude should be barred from being a stay-at-home dad, which they're not. No, nobody's barred from that. I'm not exactly sure what Nina's position is. I'm not really sure Nina has a position. Luckily, I have a fantastic position. So maybe Nina can like play off of that. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, I have a bit of a history with Nina. So let me kind of explain to you what this history is. It's my contention that Nina and people like Nina suffer from a condition where microorganisms infect their brains called neenomoids. These neenomoids get in there and start making them say and do and assert ridiculous shit that nobody cares about and makes no sense. In this particular case, the neenomoids have gotten in there and have convinced Nina, for reasons unbeknownst to me and anybody else who has any type of logic and reason or, will of any kind, that men and women are equal, which they're not equal. There is no such thing as egalitarianism. We've been over this before, but when it comes to gender itself, Nina will tell you that she's a gender abolitionist, right? First, you have to start with the assumption, the very weak assumption, this logical chain, first and foremost, that there's a such thing as gender at all, that it's not just some sort of complete societal construction that's limited based on whatever tribe you're a part of or whatever locality that you're a part of. My contention, very simply, is that gender itself doesn't even exist, that everything that Nina would consider to be a socially constructed gender role is actually a biologically grounded phase of sex and necessary for the perpetuation of human existence. That's what I think, but that's also because, I'm a person who has some sort of grounding in these things and have thought about them over and over again. So I'd like to hear what's Nina's thoughts on transgenderism, That would be a focus of gender, for instance, not just transgenderism, but transracialism. I'd like to hear Nina's take on that. I'd like to hear Nina's take on gender, right? As it appears that she thinks it can just be changeable and malleable, and it's not really related to sex. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Cool. Let me just give a quick statement. So I'm going to be generally hands off during this moderation. I will step in only in two situations. Number one, where it's so much over talking, no one can understand anyone. I will allow for a good amount of discourse and banter. But if it gets to the point where no one can understand anyone, I will step in. Or number two, if I feel like the conversation is completely off the rails, in which case I will try to redirect it. But generally speaking, you guys probably won't hear much from me during this debate. All right, guys, floor is yours.
I love that you use the Nemoids again.
Yeah, the Nemoids. So before the Nemoids become too overwhelming, you have to begin to dog mom drink them away with your wine cup. What do you think that gender is, Nina?
Well, you said it didn't exist. I'm a little confused on what your stance on that is. What I think gender is a socially constructed performance, basically, that is a display to go towards like a very either feminine or masculine interpretation of yourself.
So it doesn't exist. It's not a physical reality.
What do you mean? Does it exist? Does a play exist?
What
do you mean?
Smell it, taste it, touch it. Does it actually exist, or is it just something that is in our brains that we make up?
You can see it. What do you mean?
Where do you see it at?
Define what you're saying about existing, because it seems like you're being a little, ironically, nebulous about it.
No, ironically, I'm not being nebulous at all. So
I mean, the word gender obviously exists. The phrase gender exists. The theory of gender theory exists. So, are you saying what are you trying to say exactly?
I'm trying to ask you if this thing exists as a physical reality, or if it's simply an emotional manifestation or a human social construction. Meaning, if all human beings were gone,
social construction. Yeah.
Okay, if it's a human social construction, then it doesn't exist in reality. It's just made up.
I don't see that direct connection between that. That's like saying words don't exist, because if humans weren't there wouldn't be words.
Words do exist.
That's such a okay. Because of what? Explain to me why.
Because of sound. You have sound and interpreters which interpret the sound, and so you have physical existence.
Yeah, but if humans don't exist, then you're kind of giving me if a tree falls in the wood, would it make a sound argument here? That's just
no. I'm not giving you that. Let me try to help you out here, right? All I'm looking to establish from you, because you are a gender abolitionist, meaning you want to abolish gender. I'm just trying to establish if gender is real or if it's not real. If it exists in tangible reality, or if it's just some made up shit that you're trying to abolish.
Literally everything is made up if we're talking about language. So I think that we're kind of on this level right now, and I think that it's
not
kind
everything.
Of silly for you
not
to make
everything
that
is made up when we're talking about language. What do you mean? That's absurd. Makes no sense. There's all kinds of things in language that isn't made up. Right, that is a physical manifestation that you can look at.
But language itself is made up.
Yes, you could say that the process is a social construction. That's fine. So that's made up. Got it. Right. So I'm just trying to figure out, you want to abolish this thing. Is this thing real that you want to abolish to begin with?
Andrew, just to quickly clarify your position for the chat, you believe sex is real, but gender is made up, correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
that's
cool.
A biological reality. And so what I think is that all these social behaviors that Nina thinks are related to you're a man or you're a woman, okay, and these are genders. So this is the way she perceives it. She says, if X amount of traits are masculine, that's manly. If X amount of traits are feminine, then that's womanly, right? This is the way that she perceives this. So I'm saying that.
Let me clarify.
Hang on, let me clarify my position. I'm almost done.
Okay,
and then I'll pass the floor over to you. What I'm saying specifically is that the way that human beings interact with their environment is directly associated with their sex. So their sex and how they react with their environment is going to create the relationship of what you consider to be masculine or feminine be a necessity. Things like short hair, wearing jewelry, all of these things are actually manifestations that are necessities for men. in order to get along in whatever their environment is. So you can say like short hair for a military haircut, lack of jewelry because your hands get caught in things, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's almost always a practical explanation and application, which is environmental, which manifests itself as to why it is that these behaviors exist, rather than the fact that it's just, we just made up these social roles one day and we need to reverse engineer them so that now we're equal. That's bizarre.
Okay. It's funny that you mentioned jewelry, because that used to be a very masculine trait to wear a bunch of jewelry. So I feel like a lot of like the history that we look back on, traits of both men and or I guess like we're going to be like biological females, biological men, whatever. Like what was considered of traditionally like biological females would, wear dress, biological men, whatever. All of like the dress, the way that they'd act, like all of those behaviors have changed like so many times throughout history that I'd find it very odd for you to say that like, oh, there isn't like a cultural sense of a gendered expectation to be one sort of way because it relates to your sex. Sorry. And you're going to tell me that like wearing jewelry is more feminine? Like I don't really know where you're at with
Depends
that.
on what the environmental setup was that caused that behavior to become integrated with masculine or feminine behavior.
So you're then telling me that it's socially conditioned, right? Because it has to have to do with your environment.
Well, it's not just socially conditioned. I'm saying that there's a biological catalyst for it. So,
well, then why have things been the opposite throughout time? Like
they haven't been the opposite
jewelry
throughout
used to
time.
been a very masculine thing to have a lot of jewelry.
Yeah, it could be that the environmental manifestation for this becoming something that's masculine is that jewelry was extremely rare. And so for men to establish dominance over other men via wealth, they would wear their actual wealth. That could be one explanation for why that's a manifestation of environment with sex. But it always, if you look for a descriptor of why these things end up happening, why we make these associations, you can always whittle it back to the biological sex of the person and people group engaging with material reality, okay, and the environment, and those creating the social behaviors via necessity. Even right now, that's the case.
Via necessity? What do you mean when you say via necessity?
So there's some reason for it that is environmental, and their biology intersects with the environment, and that's the reason that these behaviors start.
Why is there a biological reason to wear jewelry?
I just gave you the example. What was my example that I just gave you? Nina, repeat it back to me of how that could be the case, that men would find it to be good to wear a lot of jewelry at certain points in history. Why would they think that as a possibility?
I assume because they just like the way it looks.
Oh, because they just wanted to.
Like a status symbol, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, status symbol, right? So the biological human male behavior of being a dominant over one another. One of the ways in which you can show your dominance is with displays of wealth. So if you have a display of wealth, in this case, jewelry, of course, it would be considered masculine, or maybe stylistics, or maybe clothing, or all sorts of different trends. But all of it is dictated around the biology of both the male and the females interacting with their environment. So I'm saying that these aren't just characteristics of people who have like, oh, I think that pink is just pretty, so we consider it feminine. It's way more complex than that.
Okay, so it seems like you're just kind of going in a circle, just trying to weirdly like kind of agree with me that you are saying it's just socially conditioned. Then you understand what social conditioning means, right?
Well, no, it's not just socially conditioned. It would be the opposite of just socially conditioned. I'm saying that there's actually biological functions which make these social conditions. Let me give you an example of how I know that that's true. Can you name a place on planet Earth where men or women predominantly act as the protectors and act as the physical arm and act as the strength of whatever the tribe or nation is? And that this is purposeful.
I have no idea what this has to do with jewelry. Can we stand
Well, because what I'm saying is that anywhere on planet Earth, there's a biological reality that there's a huge difference between men and women. And one of those huge differences is the interaction with environment is that men are far stronger. So they almost always, no, not even
So they
almost
were
always,
more
they
driven.
always end up moving into those roles by necessity. That's the way their biology interacts with the environment and why the social behavior begins to begin with.
Okay, so why would they wear jewelry then?
I just gave you the example.
No,
I
why
literally
are you
just gave you
relating
the
that? No,
example.
but why did you relate that to the jewelry conversation we were just having? I don't understand your logic here. Like you're saying, like, oh, because dudes
biology,
like are
the
like
way
defenders or
biology
whatever?
interacts with environment is what actually creates what you consider gender. That's
What do you
why.
mean by that? Very specifically, what do you mean when biology interacts with environment? Because that kind of just sounds like me that you're just literally describing like social conditioning.
I've
So you need
already. Okay, is your sex socially conditioned?
No.
No, it's not. It's a biological reality, right?
Sure.
And the distinctions in these realities is that men have different hormones. They have different brain archetypes, different interests, all sorts of different things that just by itself, the hormones on average between the two create physical differences between the two, to the point where it's almost absurd to say otherwise, right? So if that's the case, if just off of the difference in chemical makeup between men and women, they then have to operate with whatever their environment is, their localized environment, whether it's, let's say, the desert, let's say the forest, let's say the Great Plains, wherever it is. The biological makeup of men and women are going to interact with those environments differently based on strength differentials, interest differentials, all of these different types of things. So the biological extension of them engaging with their environment itself is going to create these naturally distinct roles, but many of them become universalized. There's a distinction, in other words, between men and women biologically.
Okay, you're going off on a tangent here, my guy. I gotta.
Well, it's not a tangent. Like, I'm trying to explain it so a 2-year-old would understand it.
Right, but then, I mean, it's very confusing. Again, let's just keep with the jewelry conversation. If we want to keep it simple, I feel like that's the best way to go about it. Let's just stay focused on the jewelry example. So how would you explain with what you were saying about the biological relating to your environment thing with the jewelry, where there used to be a very male-centric thing to wear jewelry
or high heels could be an example.
Exactly, yes,
or any different number of stylistics.
So how is that not social if it's changed with biological men now do not tend to do that?
Because Ferraris didn't exist, Nina. Because they displayed their wealth in a different way, Nina. Obviously, that's why. Because they didn't have.
Well, Nina,
stop. Let me finish. I'm trying to finish. Because they weren't able to peacock with their Ferrari or their Lamborghini or their giant mansion or this type of thing. But it was the same thing. It's a demonstration of wealth for dominance or to attract the female or whatever.
Okay, so why don't modern guys just
they do peacock?
I mean, like, there is an ass, right? But what? Okay, so then why aren't they wearing heels?
No. What they do now is they get their legs broken. They get their legs broken, and then have their legs extended so that they appear taller instead of wearing heels. They literally get their legs broken now, Nina, because of science. Because science allows them. Let me finish, Nina. You asked me a question. You need to let me finish the answer. Literally, men will get their legs broken and then reconstructed so that they appear to be taller. This was the same reason that it used to be stylish for men to wear lifts. They weren't directly high heels, but they were lifted shoes so that they appeared taller.
Wait, but if they're status symbols, that doesn't really make any sense, right? Because I assume the idea that the heels were a status symbol was because they were expensive to make.
That could be one reason.
If you're talking about the breaking the legs thing, if you can't tell that you paid for that, then how is that a status symbol?
Okay, listen. I'm saying that it's both and. It could be both and. So it could be that they want to appear taller. Could be that they want to appear taller, so they wear boots, for instance, maybe lifted boots or lifted shoes, or they have their legs broken to extend their height, or they wear certain shoes which are completely non-functional in reality, but are god awful expensive. And they want to wear those as a status symbol, which many men do that as well. So all of it, all of these different reasons, in other words, are extensions of the biological reality of men's behavior being different. So to summarize this, gender is a direct expression of biological sex interacting with environment.
I mean, I don't really want to keep going on with circles in this, but like, you're really just literally describing like social factors here. So I think like you're kind of posting a little bit about the
so
sex being related to it. I'm sure things like have like a very small degree of relation depending on like your biology, I guess. But I mean, which one do you think is more powerful? Like, what do you think about the whole because we kind of wanted to bring this up.
Yeah, that is true. Your audio is desynced, by the way. You might want to log out and log back in.
What's the issue?
Her audio is desynced.
Is it?
I didn't know.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe that's on you. I mean, Alex, is your audio desynced? You're just trying to.
It sounds fine for me.
No, it's not. It doesn't. It's not a sound issue.
She's seeing my video and my audio.
I know. No, I'm saying I don't see it. Chad,
here, look straight at the camera and say test 1, 2, 3, so Alex can see for himself.
Test 1, 2, 3.
Did you see that?
Okay, there's a little bit of a lag. Yeah, it's minor, but yeah, if you want to log back in, it's fine. But it's not significant. But it's up to you.
Like you're just trying to say that to throw me off my game. I mean, I'll just do it right in the mic.
It's unnecessary for me to do anything to throw you off your game, Nina. It's completely unnecessary.
I mean, the fact that I'm running it through OBS might be the reason why, and I'm not going to fix that. So it's as long as it's
fine. It's not significant.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Where were we at, Mr. Distracting?
You were about to ask me a question.
Yeah, can you give me the context? You're the one who distracted me.
The context for your question? I have no idea
what we were talking about previously, my guy.
Well, I don't know, my girl.
You guys were talking about
doing some like sneaky shit right now?
I don't know. I don't know what your question was going to be.
You guys were talking about status symbols and how like back then they used to wear heels, now they don't. And you were making arguments because of technology. I think you were going to give some counterpoint to that or ask him a question. I don't know.
Right. I remember saying something about like not wanting to go in circles about this, but
as you collect your thoughts and find your next cup of wine, I'll crack a beer here while you figure out what it is that you wanted to ask me. So one more time to state my position: gender is a direct expression of biological sex interacting with environment.
Oh, I thought you said it didn't exist.
One more time, what you're calling gender. It's an internal critique. Gender. Yes, it's an internal critique, Nina.
Okay, but then it kind of tracks in some way because it seems like you're stating exactly what a socially conditioned thing is. So I think we're kind of in agreement on this, I guess. We're just choosing to
no, it's not socially conditioned. One more time. To repeat my position.
No, it's a social structure. I'm not saying it's socially conditioned. I think it's a social structure. It's just like a social thing. Based on? Literally, it's you reacting with your environment. That's what a social thing is.
Let me clarify this because I think I understand Andrew's position. So Andrew's saying that your gender is always going to be the same as your sex. The whole concept of a gender social construct, because you cannot have a different gender than your sex, right? It's the same thing. Gender really means sex, right? Correct, Andrew?
Yes, that's correct. They're interchangeable terms. Literally interchangeable terms.
Right. And Nina, I believe you don't believe that. I believe you can have a difference between gender and sex. And I believe that gender, for example, is something that's not necessarily 100% reliant on sex, right? So that's kind of the crux of it.
Yeah, it's an expression of yourself to relate to more like either feminine or, I mean, obviously in gender abolition, it is kind of unironically a little bit in agreement with the fact that it doesn't exist. You're kind of like going full circle on this, where you actually align more with like the more radical theories of gender abolition that would actually agree with what you're saying, where it is just a bunch of like social relations between like between your sex and the way that you're perceived. But I feel like what we're missing here is the understanding of what modern versions of like gender is and the subtleties of what it would look like, gender abolition in the future would look like versus what it is now. Because I know you wanted to talk about like, you know, transness and stuff like that. And I think that it's really interesting conversation to have, but I just want to make sure that you understand what I'm saying when I do say things like you're kind of going like full circle to being a little bit like of a gender abolitionist yourself, where
I
to
can't
some
abolish
extent,
a thing which doesn't exist.
okay, but you're using the word, so the point is to change what it would.
That's because the word is completely synonymous with the word sex. I mean the same exact thing. When people in the modern times say the word gender, they actually mean the word sex. They've always meant it this way. They have never meant it as a set value of behaviors between the two sexes. They've always meant it as just being sex. So if you go back to the 90s and you play Baldur's Gate and it says select a gender, it's asking you to select a sex. It's not asking you to select a carefully assorted bunch of traits that you think are associated with a woman. It's literally asking you to pick a sex.
Right,
That's
but
what it
do you
means by
understand?
gender.
Okay, yeah, no, I mean, like, yeah, Baldur's Gate, very good factual statement or
No,
course,
everything
but
you could
no, I
possibly
understand.
imagine for the word gender, which has always been used since its inception by John Money.
Does your driver's license say that?
John Money. Your driver's license doesn't ask you for gender, it asks you for sex.
Right, so like an actual government.
Yeah, but John Money
related
came up
thing.
with the modern conceptualization of gender. And when it was introduced out into the ethos and people began to use it, they used it as a synonym for sex. It was never used as a trait-specific characterization for X amount of female behaviors, or what we perceive as female behaviors in whatever society you are makes you a woman. That's insane and has never been the truth. Ever.
Right. You guys disagree about what gender is. That's the part.
Well, yeah, he's saying it is. Okay, so you said you want to talk about gender roles then, and if you're going to tell me that gender doesn't exist, where are we at on that one?
He thinks it's
so
a
So
you
are there
think-
sex roles?
You think that gender is a separate conceptualization of sex. I do not. If you're going to make the claim, though, that
What?
gender and sex is the same thing, then we are in agreement and you could just concede the debate.
Didn't say that.
Well, then make an argument.
I asked you a question about what are gender roles to you then?
Well, there's no such. I just told you there's no such thing. There's just sexes interacting with their environment. There's male and female. That's it. That's all there is.
Okay, so you just refuse to accept the idea that there are gender roles? Because I've talked to you before, my guy. Like, that's not what your position was back.
Why don't you tell me what my position was before?
Well, you thought that gender roles were a good thing.
Really? Why don't you point out any place I've ever said anything of the sort? When we're, especially gender roles, it's absurd on its face. There's just sex. There's biological sex. There's nothing outside of that. There never has been anything outside of that. Anything that you consider to be this set value group of feminine or masculine traits is nothing more than an extension of your actual baseline biology.
Okay,
and
so what does that mean?
You just make up a word in your head in order to accommodate this small group of mentally ill people, basically, nothing else.
Which is who?
In this case, transgenders.
What does that have to do with gender roles?
Well, because they're trying to change their gender, Nina. They say that your gender is not based on your biological sex, but whether it's a construction.
No, but do you understand what gender roles are? Gender roles have really nothing to do with trans people.
Yeah, I understand conceptually what you're saying a gender role is. I'm just telling you that it's not some sort of movement of pushed behavior saying, if you're a girl, we expect you to act this way. Rather, it's a set of environment.
1,000% what it is.
Right. So that's the crux. Now you're getting to the crux of the disagreement. Rather, it's a biological reality of your sex engaging with environment, which creates conditions where you have to act in certain ways because to do otherwise would be in contrary to your own nature.
So you just think anyone that doesn't go with whatever, I don't know, sex roles you want to call it? Like, okay, so for example, like if somebody doesn't want to have children or like doesn't want to take care of the children, you know, or a cis woman doesn't want to take care of the children and wants to just work.
Just a woman, you mean?
A cis woman.
Woman.
Yes, a cis woman, yes.
What makes her cis?
The fact that her gender identity aligns with her sex.
What does that
That's what
mean?
this
Your
means.
gender identity. So if that's true, then
How you perceive yourself.
what makes Alex white?
I don't know who that is.
The guy who's hosting the debate. What makes him white?
Oh, I didn't know your last name. Sorry.
His first
Dogs.
name is Alex. What do you talk? It's in
What do you
bold.
think?
It's in bold. His name is in bold. It's ALE. You can't miss it.
How the fuck am I going to assume that? I thought there's
You
plenty of
guys-
other
I'm
people
gonna
named
assume you
Alex.
can read,
Oh, you see
Nina.
Alex Jones? I'm going to assume that it's Alex, like him. Like what the
Don't
fuck are you talking
assume
about?
what makes Alex the guy whose name
Wow,
is
so
Alex
desperate, huh?
in a big bold letters ALEX. What makes him white? What makes him white, Nina?
Oh, I thought you were saying his last name was White. Jesus
No.
fuck, sorry.
Like, why? Like
That's
this-
not at all what we were talking about. I was not misunderstanding. My bad. I thought you said what makes Alex white, and then just like stop talking. What makes him white? Like what the fuck does that have to do with like your gender identity?
Well, because is it just an identity that he's white?
Well, I mean, whiteness in itself is more of a metric of like power. Like as we know, obviously in the past, like even like Germans weren't considered white back in the day.
So
Like,
can he
this
change?
is like 101 stuff.
So hang on. So can he change himself being white as an identity?
Okay, as I said, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about when it comes
Yeah, it
to
does.
like
It does have it's
curtailing
one
to
for one.
mass.
It's
Wait, so you think that race is same as sex? That's
No,
what you're
Nina.
trying to argue
No,
right
Nina.
now. Yes,
I'm
that's
saying that
100% what you're trying to argue right
I'm
now.
saying that biologically, if you think that
Uh,
white is not biological but rather a social construction, and gender is just a status of identity and has nothing to do with biology, then I need you to tell me if you can change your gender, the socially constructed thing that we perceive women as. Can you change your race the same way?
in the same way as in how?
As in, can Alex begin to identify as a black man, and would it be true?
I mean, if you're gonna talk about like if he's like related to the black community, he can obviously have like a more of a feeling of more belonging to that group of people. But I don't know what you're trying to say with that. Like if we're talking
Can
about
he
like
get
does he
affirmative
identify
action?
as
Can he get
black?
affirmative?
Like
Can he get
that'd be
affirmative
very
action?
silly.
Can he get affirmative
You get
action if he identifies as black? Let's say he's raised in the black community, okay, and he has adopted the entirety of their culture and their norms,
Oh my god.
and he identifies as being black. Can he get affirmative action?
He has a humongous schlong.
Yeah, can he get affirmative action, Nina?
I don't believe that is how that works. No.
No, that's not how it works. However, in your mind,
Legally,
this
of
gender
course.
role switch, you think that trans
Uh-huh.
women should be considered actual
Okay, but
biological. Hang on, let me
you
finish, Nina.
can't-
Let me finish.
No, but I'm
Nina.
talking about reality
Nina,
here. I mean,
I'm
like
talking about
you've been
reality
talking way
too.
more than I have. Come on,
trying
guys.
to just finish
just
my
saying,
point,
like,
and I'll
let-
give it to you. But let me
okay.
finish my point,
my God.
Nina. Let me finish my point. So how this is one for one analogous is
Yeah.
you think that trans women should be afforded all of the same rights as biological women. So I want to know if you think that people who just identify as a different race should also be afforded the same status as that race.
Rights? I think everyone should have the same rights. Absolutely. What the
So
fuck?
women, so hang on. You think that woman is a legitimate protected class, right?
Is it? I don't know. Is it?
Yeah, of course. They have their own sports leagues.
Woman
they have
is
their
a protected
They have their
class.
own
Wait, do you
sports
understand
leagues,
what a
their own
protected
gyms.
class
They have their
is?
own everything.
I don't think you know what a protected class is.
What is it, Nina?
You're talking a protected class is something you could like, like hate crimes.
Yeah.
That's what usually is considered under the protected class laws.
Yeah, like
is,
Christianity
like-
would be a protected class.
Yeah, sure.
Races, different races would be a protected class. Women would operate under a protected class. They're going to have different considerations for women when they apply for college, when they apply for STEM fields, when they apply for these different things. They have their own forms of affirmative action for women. They're a protected class. So what I'm asking you specifically is if Alex can change his race, if race is socially constructed, if it's a social construct.
They're not a protected class.
Oh, man. Okay, fine, Nina. They're not a protected class. Either way, can Alex change his race and get the same protection of class that blacks would have?
I don't think you can change your race. I don't know how that would go.
Just
I don't think there's any mechanism for it. You can. I don't know if you know this, but on your ID, you can. If we're just talking like legal stuff, right? So if we're talking about like if you change your, you can actually change your ID to say that you're female. And then you are able to get certain, like if we're talking about like grants that maybe like people can get from being like or tax breaks or whatever for being women-owned business. Which again, I don't necessarily agree with affirmative action to begin with. So I don't really know how much that you think that's a gotcha. But like I personally don't necessarily even have a very strong feeling about that affirmative action is positive. I'm kind of on the fence about it personally.
Well, whether it's positive or not, try to understand why this is analogous. Because you're saying to me that gender is an identity.
But you keep saying what I think, and I don't think that because I don't really like affirmative action to begin with.
You just said gender is a form of identity.
Yes,
it's self-ID. So it's self-ID.
Self-ID, is that like a
yes? It's how you identify yourself. That's what gender is. Sure. Okay, so how come race, which is a form of social construction, is also not interchangeable as a self-ID?
Because I don't think that people of different races have any, generally like intrinsic differences outside of cultural ones, of course. So.
Yeah. So then if that's true, why couldn't you just identify as being that race because it makes you feel better and be treated as though you're that race?
I mean, you could. I just don't know what the treatment would be different. If you wanted to identify as black, what do you think? How would your life be different?
So here's how your
life. Is it just because you want to say the N-word, or what? Like, how would it change?
It would be completely different. The things that you could qualify for from the state would be totally different. Affirmative action would be totally different. All of these things would be totally different. The same as if you in your case, you say if you identify as a woman, you can go into Nina. Don't ask me a question, and then 2 seconds into the answer, you cut in. Just relax a second. Same thing as if a woman or a man decides he wants to go into women's locker rooms and self-IDs as a man, suddenly has the extended courtesy that he can just go and shower with women and this kind of thing. Okay, so you're saying that, hey, none of that matters. It's all just a conceptualization of self-identity. It's like, well, obviously it's not just a conceptualization of self-identity, because if that's the case, then you'd have to bite the bullet on race.
I don't feel like I'd have to do that. Because, okay, so...
Can Alex get affirmative action if he walks around in blackface, Nina? Can he get affirmative action if he puts on blackface and gives himself cornrows and says I'm black?
That's an interesting point to bring up, because does Alex identify as black? Let's play into what you're saying. Does he identify as black?
Yeah, but let's assume he did.
Okay, but does he?
No, I'm sure he doesn't. But who cares?
Okay, then so it doesn't really track now.
I identify as Asian, actually.
Okay, but you don't.
Sure.
But I think that's what a lot of people like you guys like mixed up a little bit with
operating
this.
within the world of he is, though. He is, for the sake of this hypothetical, we're just going to assume that he is.
Right, but what I'm saying is, like, I think that there's a lot of subtlety there with, if you're really going to talk about, like, it depends. Like, I'm half Japanese and I'm half white. Like, I could maybe identify more with one side. I identify more with my white side. Like, how do you feel about that? Like, is that like something that doesn't track like consistently? Like, I don't really think
it does.
A certain level, it really matters that much.
Let her finish her point.
Well, when she says, "Do you think X?" When she says, "Do you think X?" That's a question.
Right? Can you answer the question?
Yeah. So that both those things are pointing to biological structures, right? You are white and Japanese.
Biological. Okay, so do you think that people are significantly biologically different the same way that men and women are biologically different of being different races?
I think that the significant standard's irrelevant. That if you're just going off of like a racial construction of certain clusters of people look very similar, and therefore they're treated in certain ways due to the similar lookingness or whatever. In this particular case,
you're trying to relate that to race, right?
I'm trying to just relate it to self-ID.
Where you're at with this.
Just relating it to self-ID. So in this case, you just self-identified as half Japanese, half white. You don't believe that these are intrinsic biological categories, but rather they're social categories, correct?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so then if that's true, and these aren't biological categories, they're just completely made up social constructions, why can't you identify as black?
Well, I don't really know what would the reason to. This is why I'm saying, like, you need to know the reason behind it. Like, I don't like if you grew up around, like, again, like in a very black community, you could identify with that particular group significantly more, but that's not going to change your skin color. So, like, if we're talking about things
So
like
there's a biological element.
no, if we're talking about things like reparations and stuff like that, what we need to be addressing here is why were those things put in place? Why was affirmative action put in place? It was not to directly, like, oh, because your melanin level is a certain level that you just get this, like, this branch or whatever. What we're really talking about is, oh, how were these people's ancestors treated, right? And I think that as we go on, this thing will not be as important as it is to be racially divided in the ways that we are right now. But I think that what you're getting caught up on is, like, these structures that already exist. For example, like, and again, I have mixed feelings on affirmative action, and we can absolutely talk about that if you want to, assuming Alex is okay with that. But I have very complicated opinions on that as well. But I don't think that this tracks directly one-on-one here when it comes to sex and gender, because I think that when we really talk about, like, race, like, what does being black mean? What does being white mean? Like, those then do become, like, a very socialized thing, which I think you're trying to get at with this, and that's fair. But I think that the subtlety, you're trying to be very simplistic about, like, oh, you're all of a sudden gonna be like, oh, he can just, like, say the N-word. Like, what is identifying as black mean?
Right. Okay, so I think that's a fair question, kind of, but let me just dive into it so that you understand, right? If you want to get into kind of these nuanced distinctions. So let's start with, is thing X possible? Okay. So would you agree that it's possible for Alex to put on blackface and identify as being a black
man? It is possible for him to put on blackface, yes.
And pretend to be a black man, right?
Is identifying or pretending, I think those things are actually completely different.
Fair enough. So he can identify as then being a black man, right?
Sorry?
So he can identify as being a black man, right?
Sure.
So the question is, does that make him one?
Does that make him a black person? Again, that really is, again, when I'm talking about subtleties, is what
this is pretty subtle.
Half black person who's very light, is a light-skinned person, a very, like, somebody who looks like Alex, for example, who is half black. Is that person still black?
I think that socially they would be considered black, sure.
You think socially that they would be considered black? So the way that people would react to them was that they would just know that he was black.
Yeah, but I think that you have the case of Barack Obama to kind of fortify what I'm saying.
No, I'm saying that he looked like Alex. Is Alex?
Yeah. So now
black?
Answer my question.
He might be black.
So now answer my question. Now that I've answered yours, as you pivoted twice, Alex, if he puts on blackface and identify as black, you said he can do that. My follow-up question is, does it make him black?
Okay, but no, this is what you're losing here. Okay.
Answer the question,
we need to establish
Nina.
what being black is.
No. Yes
so if
or
somebody
no?
looks like, did you answer?
No.
You did not answer. You did not answer my question. If somebody who looks like Alex, so if somebody who looks like Alex is, black or whatever, is so what is your level of what is black? Is it just like the skin color? Is it the history, like your ancestors? Like, what do you think black is?
I think black is how we perceive a skin color of people who largely come from the sub-Saharan African region in the United States. That's what we call black.
Okay, so then he would not be considered black because he doesn't have that skin
tone.
Because to you, black just means skin tone.
Who cares? Who cares? I'm asking you.
No, that's incredible. No. That's incredibly important. So you're saying that black just means a skin color?
No, he's not saying that.
Okay.
He said he literally just said that means that you have a skin tone that is of sub-Saharan Africa.
When you're ready,
did you not just say that?
Now that I've just answered multiple more questions of yours, can we go back to mine now?
Did you just say that?
Let me one more time. I think that we associate black in the United States as individuals who you can largely identify as likely coming from the sub-Saharan African region. just due to their physiological externalities.
So you would not consider Alex, someone who looked like Alex, who was like half black, to be black then?
He's not half, but what are you talking about?
I'm saying if somebody looked like Alex, right?
Yeah, they probably wouldn't be considered black. Yes, in my framework or in socially in social framework, of course not. Now back to my question. Now that I've asked, now that I've answered all of yours, one more time back to my question. You agree that Alex can put on blackface and identify as being black. I'm going to ask you again: does that make him black in Nina's worldview? Would that make him black?
If you're right, that's why I wanted to establish this, because in your view,
who cares about my view for the 300th time? I've already explained it. Now on to you. Answer my question.
You're not. Wait, why does my opinion matter in this? Like, what do you mean? If when you say black, right, you mean people who physically look black, then no. If Alex put on blackface and said that he was black, it would really depend, I guess, on the quality of it. Like, if that's like your primary level of it, like what is black, like then on your assessment of that, then I guess yes, but that's because that's your assessment. All it is skin tone.
What about Nina's worldview? For the 300th time, I just want an answer to a question.
What you didn't ask me what.
And I answered, and I did ask you. I've asked you 6 times. I'm going to ask you again. If Alex goes in blackface, if he puts on blackface and he says he's black, is that a true statement or not in Nina's worldview? Is
it a true statement? What do you mean by true statement? Like, again, like you're just like being so nebulous in everything you're saying. A true statement about what? Like that he is all of a sudden black? And your worldview, yes.
In my worldview,
all it
yes.
Is the melanin. Yeah, because all you said was that it was melanin.
He's asking about your worldview.
Okay, but then we have to establish the conversation of what like blackness is, and I think that's again like a very subtle.
Tell me what it is.
Okay. That's an interesting conversation around that. What blackface is generally related to is what I think about is like the minstrel shows of making fun of an underclass. So
whites like, can be blacks. Just as long as they're in the underclass, whites can be blacks in, or is there something?
No, I'm just talking about the historical.
Right, I understand the history.
For example, like when we're talking about like why are things like reparations a conversation? Why are things like affirmative action a conversation? It is because of the historical injustices that have been made on historically, like when like we're talking about black, like African origin people. That were like enslaved. It really depends on what we're talking. Like in America, right? In America, we are very much talking about like people who had origins to slave ownership, and then also like obviously the conversation about Jim Crow, all of that, like the injustices, like things like affirmative action, which again, interesting conversation to have, is related to like making up for the wrongs that we had made in the past as a country. Like again, as somebody who is Japanese, the wrong that happened to my family that the country made up for was obviously the internment. It doesn't mean that Japanese people coming in after the war would get like the reparations, but the systems that have been implemented at that time, like with we're talking about like again affirmative action when it has to relate to like former like the injustices that were happening with which is why I have such a complicated relationship with how I feel about affirmative action, because I think that it's kind of gotten.
All right, I'm just stepping as a moderator.
No, don't step in. Let her go. Trust me, I'll bring it back around. Go ahead.
Just bring it back around.
Oh my God, you love just cutting me off.
I didn't cut you. I didn't cut you off.
I do want you guys to bring it back around because this is just now getting to.
I'll bring it back around. I promise. Let her finish.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. God damn it! I fucking hate getting cut off. Whatever, just do it.
You were talking about how blackness is less of an indication of skin color and the social perception, and it's more of a shared lived experience based on a specific demographic experience in history. That's where you were at.
A specific demographic experience. No, I'm saying like the ancestry. I was specifically talking about how that we were talking related to affirmative action as an aspect of like something that could be taken advantage of, because I don't think that necessarily is something that we can relate to gender, because it's like so complicated in a way that the history is like, it's not the same as in like, oh, like what you could say about like the history of like gender expression. You know, like there isn't like white people weren't really like Germans weren't considered white, right? For a while. And then they were, because what it represents is to an extent like a underclass, specifically when we're talking about America. That's where a lot of that comes from. Like the one drop rule, for example. You know what that is, right?
Yeah, to get to your point. Like I'm trying to just wait for
Okay,
you to get to your point. I've been very patiently waiting for you to get to your point.
Okay, right. But my like entire point of when your question was related to like, oh, can he like identify as Black, right? If he had like obviously like a historical relation to that community, even though he appears white, that like, yeah, sure, he could. But my problem is the blackface aspect, where I don't understand why that would be a part of the racial identity. Like, because he wouldn't have to change his physical appearance, right? If he did identify with his Black roots. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So if this is true, and you're saying that these specific groups need to be isolated in order to get reparations, how are we going to isolate the groups? We would isolate them based on their physiology. That's how we do it. So if you want to know which group belongs in the camp whose ancestors were persecuted and enslaved, there's a really easy tell for that. And the easy tell for that is their biological externalities. In your particular case, you're saying if you want to apply for reparations, or you want to have some type of group reparations for things that have happened in the past, you have to have some type of biological claim to that group. That's what you're saying. I think that that's completely true. And the same thing would apply with men and women when it came to transsexuality, that you cannot adopt the identity of women as men because you do not have the required biological makeup that would put you in that group so that you could be extended those same courtesies. So in other words, you don't get to have the same type of oppression Olympics as a man who dresses up like a woman as you do as a biological woman, because you don't share the same history. Do you understand now?
You said oppression Olympics. What is that? I didn't really think that made sense in the context of what you're talking about.
What I'm saying to you specifically is that if your claim is that you have to be a part biologically of a group in order to be isolated to be considered for these things like reparations, then you're pointing at Alex and saying, Alex simply putting on blackface wouldn't be enough because he'd have to share the history of struggle and the history of ancestry and all this other stuff. Okay, fair enough. Then why would you extend the same courtesy to men who dress up as women and pretend that they share the same struggles that women shared, have the same shared history as women, have the same biological claim to womanhood? That's insane.